Alright, hi guys, I'm Amy Teeter. I will be doing a visual aid speech on hydroponic systems and the different types that there are and kind of the hydroponic systems that I've made. So the first one is a ebb and flow system. This one's kind of one of the most popular ones. It's also one of the more complex ones. So ebb and flow, pretty much it uses a tray like this. Usually they're a lot bigger though. It has about 6-inch sides to it, so that way the water stays in. It's a little bit different. When people think of hydroponic, they think of just water, but ebb and flow actually pots into an actual pot with soil. It has holes on the bottom, and then it sits in here like this. So what happens is there's a filter that runs through it. There's a little tube that has an aeration system. So what happens is it recirculates the nutrients from the bottom when you water the plants, when it comes back and it rewaters it. So it's kind of also known as a flood and drain system, which is pretty good. But that's one of the more common ones. It's a little bit more complex. There's more air pump systems involved in that. There's more nutrients involved in that. There's certain things you have to put into the water to keep that recirculating. And again, that's with soil, so it's not strictly water. That one, I have a couple similar systems to it. I kind of use, I also use a little bit more of the pots that are involved with it. You just use a drain hole system with what I've created. There's drain holes in my cups. I'll kind of get into that later and how I make those. But that's kind of that system. So ebb and flow, more common, but it's also more complex and can tend to be a little bit more expensive just because of all the materials you have to buy for it. The next one is the deep water culture. Deep water culture is something that's a little bit more similar to what I do. Usually you'll see these indoors in large Tupperware containers or big tubs. They're usually about this big. I did a smaller scale one for that, and I kind of made my own materials. We'll go over that as well. But deep culture is a little bit more simple. It's still commonly used. People still use it. However, it's a little bit more like an aeration system. So sometimes they require pumps, air pumps. You can get that at like just the simple PetSmart, whatever. But I don't use an air pump in mine. I did a little bit more of an inexpensive route. You don't need the air pump. It provides more oxygen for the plants, so it is helpful, but it's not necessary. So that's one of the similar things with it. What I've done with this is I've just taken a simple one. I've gone ahead and created these cups. So what I did is, if you look, I have these holes in between to let water in, and then there's a big hole at the bottom, so that way it can root down. Now what this is rock wool, so it's pretty much like just a great seed starter. There's not a ton of nutrients necessarily in it, but it is good to help seeds start to grow. So you can fit that down in there so that way more water reaches the bottom of it. Otherwise, coming in from the top, it'll just sit in there and you don't really want it to sit. So the next thing I did is I just took a lid, I cut holes in it with just an X-Acto knife, pretty easy. I used this guy, I flipped him upside down like that, and I did it on the inside of it, so that way it didn't fall through. So you want to be careful, otherwise it will fall through. So you do that. Next, you take your rock wool, you can separate it. Looks like that. They come in big bins like that, they're pretty easy. You have a little hole at the top you just poke down. Take seeds, whatever you want. This one is green peppers that I have in here. And you just pop that right in there. Now this one is going to be more of a lettuce. The little guy, he's starting to come up. This is maybe a week or two old, so he's actually starting to go. But basically, you want to go ahead and fill this up. Have some water right here. You want it filled up, but you don't want it all the way. You want it to reach just the base of the cup, so you don't want it to be fully inside of it. Now, I might not have enough water in here to show it exactly, but you're going to want it to be halfway up the cup. So halfway up the green rock wool, that's where you're going to want it to be. So that way it can set in there and it can just stay. It'll get the water going. And it'll go like that. So after a couple of weeks, it'll eventually kind of grow into something more similar to this, where it has roots and everything. Now, I basically did the same process here, just in one of these. So I just poked a bunch of holes, kind of similar. I didn't do the long strips like I did for these, but a bunch of holes around it, a big hole on the bottom. So that way you can have it root down towards that too. and then you just set that in there. You'll fill it up with water. This one I have it filled up halfway just because it likes more water. I found it was growing slower when I didn't have as much water in there. Some people put fertilizer in there, some kind of nutrients. I don't, because when I did, it started killing them. It was almost too powerful, so I had to dilute it down. But this guy is another system. Some people use clay pebbles. I use gravel because it's inexpensive and you don't have to buy it. And you can see the roots there. It's kind of cool, like how they spread out and everything. So that's lettuce. This is a little bit different, but it's the same type of concept as this hydroponic system. So it's great because you don't have to use, a lot of air pumps and things like that. You can make it simple like I did. Make it from solo cups. These are just plastic solo cups, pretty cheap. But you can use that, and then lettuce grows usually within about 30 days, depending. If you use more nutrients, it'll grow faster. This one doesn't grow quite as fast. But that's about it. You've got ebb and flow.